Hello, mko aje? Hope mko poa. Haki na kuomba subscribe kwa hii channel na ulike hii video. Thank you.
After Sharon was told by Isabel that she didn't really want Neema and Mark to be close, she ran home, locked herself in her room, and started crying. She heard a knock on the door and thought it was Isabel, but to her surprise, it was Dan. He had returned with flowers. Dan asked her why she was crying, but Sharon told him that she was just happy to see him. Then she asked Dan, "I want you to tell me the truth. Was I a bad person before the surgery? It's hard to believe that I was that terrible." Dan nodded and comforted her, trying to calm her down. He took all the blame upon himself. That night, the two families, Mzee Babujay's family and Neema's family, gathered for dinner. As they ate, Kate commented, "I see we are now living peacefully as a family." JoJo agreed, but added, "Yes, we are fine as a family, but Mark should find his own family. When our father returns, we will be a complete family." This statement deeply hurt Mark. The girl talking didn't even know how to change a baby's diaper, yet she was speaking such nonsense. Neema told JoJo to calm down, but the conversation continued. JoJo stood up, saying he was going to get his phone, but everyone knew he was actually going to Mark's room. What a mistake. Meanwhile, Karen was lying on her bed, crying. Eddie came in and started packing his clothes. Karen tried to stop him, begging him not to do this, but Eddie had already made up his mind. As he picked up his things, he told her, "Listen, woman, I have closed all the accounts I opened for you. The only thing I am leaving you with is this hotel. You better find a rich man to keep it running. Go back to your ex now." He took his belongings and left, heading to Nairobi to reunite with his family. Back at Neema's place, the family continued eating. Meanwhile, JoJo made his way upstairs and managed to unlock Mark's drawing room. He searched through everything until he found the sketches Mark had been drawing of Neema. He also found a picture of them dancing together at a club. Downstairs, things were heating up. Sharon apologized to Neema for mistreating her in the past, but she kept insisting that Neema and Mark were already married. She also shared her own good news. She and Dan had decided to get back together. Just then, JoJo arrived with the pictures and announced, "See, Sharon was right. These two are dating." Neema stood up and tried to tell JoJo to calm down so they could talk in private, but Sharon added, "Why are you hiding it? Didn't Isabel tell me she saw Neema and Mark kissing? And you, Kate, didn't I see you kissing someone else at the farm? And JoJo, didn't I also see you kissing Jaden?" Sharon exposed everyone, leaving them all in shock. However, JoJo had made a mistake. He had let too many people find out about this. Kate had not even married Mark yet. What a mess. Neema's encounter and JoJo's uncertainty. Neema arrived at her father's place, visibly disturbed. She immediately confided in him, explaining how Naomi had told JoJo about Eddie, leading to a heated argument with both of them. However, Grandpa Jay reassured her, telling her not to worry too much about it. Upon entering the house, Neema found Mark playing with Ian, and Kate was also present. Kate quickly sensed that something was off and, reading the room, decided to create space for a private conversation. She took Ian aside, leaving Neema and Mark to talk in a quieter spot. Mark, noticing the concern on Neema's face, wasted no time and asked, "What's wrong? What happened?" Neema sighed, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "I tried to avoid confrontation again, but I ended up telling them everything that was on my mind." Mark nodded in approval. "You did the right thing. Honestly, she deserved to hear that a long time ago." Neema hesitated for a moment before adding, "I also talked about you." Mark looked at her curiously, but before he could ask for details, their conversation was interrupted. JoJo had sent a text, a cryptic message saying he wasn't coming back. Alarmed, Neema quickly tried calling him, but his phone went unanswered. Mark, ever the voice of reason, gently told her, "Don't stress too much about it. Sooner or later he will realize what kind of person Naomi is and what his father did." Eddie's call to Richard. Meanwhile, Eddie, who had been growing increasingly frustrated, decided to call Richard. The moment Richard picked up, his voice was filled with irritation. "What do you want at this hour, Eddie?" he asked, clearly exasperated. Eddie didn't beat around the bush. "I had to borrow someone's phone because you blocked my number." Richard sighed heavily, already regretting answering the call. But Eddie wasn't done. He had finally made up his mind. He was going to follow up on the money he was owed. Things had become more complicated than he anticipated, and now, instead of just being patient, he was ready to act. Slowly but surely, the truth about Naomi's financial dealings was coming to light, and Eddie had a feeling that Richard held some important information. With a mixture of frustration and determination, Eddie pressed, "I need you to go through Naomi's files, specifically anything related to her loans. She's been making payments, right?" Richard let out a dry laugh. "I'm tired of you, Eddie. Find yourself another lawyer." But Eddie wasn't giving up that easily. "Please, just listen to me. You're the only person I trust to do this right. Help me as a professional. Do the job and I'll pay you whatever you charge. Just send me the bill after it's done. Please, I'm begging you. I'll tell you everything once I get there." Richard, already halfway through hanging up, rolled his eyes and muttered, "Keep your stories to yourself." And with that, he ended the call. For a moment he sat there thinking, "What does this Naomi really want?" he mused to himself. The situation was becoming messier by the day, and it was clear that things were far from over. JoJo's dilemma and Naomi's next move. Back at Neema's place, she and Mark had a deep conversation, unaware that things were taking a different turn elsewhere. JoJo had been contemplating his next move. He had fought with his mother and talked to his father, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't see himself going home. In a desperate moment, he reached out to Naomi, asking if he could stay at her place for the night. That one decision would change everything, because if Naomi refused, JoJo would have nowhere to go. And if he ended up spending the night at Naomi's, well, that would bring its own complications. Meanwhile, Naomi had her own plans. She knew JoJo was vulnerable, and she saw this as an opportunity to win him over. But she also had another idea, to get JoJo to cut ties with Jaden. She figured if she could isolate him, he would be easier to control. However, Naomi was underestimating JoJo. He wasn't as easily manipulated as she thought. JoJo, despite being in a tough situation, wasn't willing to play into Naomi's hands. He had no intention of being controlled, and deep down, he was starting to see her for who she really was. Eddie's desperation and unexpected twists. Eddie, feeling defeated but not ready to give up, wandered the streets like a lost man. He was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and physically. He had been betrayed, played, and now he was losing patience. But then a new idea struck him. He reached for his phone, determined to call Naomi. Maybe, just maybe, she would finally answer him. But when he dialed her number, he was met with the most brutal rejection. He had been blocked. He stared at his phone, disbelief washing over him. "So this is how it is?" he muttered to himself. But Eddie wasn't the type to accept defeat. He quickly came up with a